Pearson Rabbit's story begins with Dr. Stephanie Pearson, a passionate OBGYN at the height of her career. When a shoulder injury struck during a precipitous delivery, her dreams were shattered, leaving her unable to practice medicine. Determined to make a difference, Stephanie became an advocate for her peers, guiding them through the complex disability process. Alongside insurance expert Scott Ravitz, Stephanie founded Pearson Ravitz, a company determined to approach insurance differently. Together, they set their mission to educate and empower physicians to protect their most valuable asset, their income, and the most important people in their life, their family. Today, Pearson Ravitz serves the medical community in all 50 states. At Pearson Ravitz, they understand the unique concerns of physicians. Physician-founded and physician-focused, Pearson Ravitz builds human connections before they create quotes. Life can change in an instant. It's hard to imagine that a sudden illness or injury could leave you and your family in a devastating financial situation. But with a little planning and guidance, you can prepare for every possibility. Visit PearsonRavitz.com today to schedule your consultation with a Pearson Ravitz advisor.
Finally, a source of raw, real, and honest information on healthcare issues that matter most. Welcome to BS-Free MD. From the latest medical information to how to stay sane as a doctor or a patient, no subject is taboo, no BS is allowed. Now, let's welcome your hosts, Doctors May and Tim Hindmarsh.
All right. Well, thank you, Alexx, for being on our show, BS-Free MD. I'm super excited you're here because I've been a fan of yours, listening to your podcast, reading your book, and super happy to just dive in and talk low-tox living with you.
Well, I'm excited to be here, and I just want to say thank you to both of you for being doctors who are asking questions about why our general public health is not improving when we spend this much on healthcare. We have to look outside the box and start thinking more holistically. So I just get excited knowing there are doctors doing that all around the world now and wanting to change the story.
Yeah, definitely. It's a new narrative for traditionally trained doctors, that's for sure, and incorporating that into and actually residencies in not just alternative type medicine.
Now, as soon as it's in medical training, I become very suspicious.
Yeah,
because that's where the that's the bullshitorium. So I always get
maybe a heavy emphasis on pharma in there that you don't want.
Well, right, but the bottom line is that there's just such a lack of common sense. You either get a pill for every ill, or you get some woo-woo stuff that just doesn't make sense. I mean, there's clearly a middle ground. There's clearly a place for all sorts of alternative healthcare, but the common sense part is stop poisoning yourself and exercise.
Well,
hello.
So why don't you just start so that our audience kind of knows a little bit about your background and how you got interested in low-tox living, or I know that maybe you haven't always been. Just share a little bit with us.
Definitely not. I was a child of the 80s. I grew up, first few years were in Chicago, and that was the mid 70s, actually, my earliest, preschool and fourscore. And so, reciting those little concerts at the end of the year. And so I remember as a kid in Chicago, actually, in the mid-70s, when that was that amazing time where women were starting to come into the workforce in droves, and not just nurses, teachers, but you could, of course, do that if that's what you wanted to do, but the scope for one's professional life really grew for women. And as Michael Pollan says, it was a real chance for women and men to sit down together as a family unit, for communities to come together and say, okay, if we're going to change the way we're doing things, where there's not someone at home all the time able to manage everything at home, how does that look? How do we start bake up circles so that everybody kind of cooks one big thing and then you switch and then everyone's got 6 meals for the week? We could have had all those conversations, but we did not. And it ended up being the time where ultra-processed food took flight. And so I grew up with a very normal mum who was very excited that there was all this help on the way. There were these things we could just automatically heat up, and there were these fun snacks, and it was all geared around fun and having a break and treating yourself and all those messages that make you think, oh, wow, you guys care. You want to make my life more fun, better. And so many of us, right, fell for that hook, line, and sinker. And I was the kid who had all the coolest, newest snacks. I had an American bubblegum collection when I was in Australia. As a kid, there was a special store you could go to in town. So I really grew up revering all these exciting new things in the food system. And then came my first job while I was getting myself through university in cosmetics. And then I started to revere all of these beautiful perfumes and help people choose the ones that really brought out their personality and mood, and all the different creams that you could put. Like, I proudly sold face creams full of hormone disruptive chemicals for $400. Like, I was right at the top of the luxury end of the cosmetic market, and that career grew for me. And interestingly enough, in retrospect, it was a time in my life where I had chronic tonsillitis and I had chronic migraine. And there was nowhere or no one telling me every time I went to the pharmacist to get my new super high strength painkillers or, the next round of antibiotics at the doctor's, there was no one cautioning, hey, these painkillers in lots of dosage are really bad for your liver long term, like not a great idea. No one ever said that to me. And no one ever said, this is going to potentially ruin your immune system for life, taking this many antibiotics. Like, let's try and figure something out here. Never. And so back to kind of finishing up in cosmetics, I remember having this sense of feeling allergic to my job, but I couldn't quite, it was just a feeling. It was like, I cannot be here anymore. This is not for me. I need a complete change. My mother and father were not so delighted when their management level mid-20-year-old moved into being a singer in nightclubs as a complete flip. But that sent me into hospitality. And because I had this management background by then, I became really good at managing huge teams in big clubs and bars, teaching everybody about spirits and alcohol. So this couldn't be more high tox a career path so far.
But some toxins are delicious.
Tea's
Yeah,
delighted.
well, I am partial to a margarita at Christmas time, but so I never say perfect. And that's kind of how Low-Tox was born. So I went through this life, a very conventional, very normal, actually quite a successful couple of careers in cosmetics and hospitality. And then I got to the point where I had antibiotic resistance. So we had tried every antibiotic possible for strep throat and nothing worked. And it was a real turning point because a girlfriend of mine said, have you thought about seeing a naturopath? And I had no idea what that was. So a naturopath's in Australia, just for the Americans who think, oh, you mean like a naturopathic doctor? It's like, no, it's a little bit different here. You do a Bachelor of Health Science, or you can even do a master's, but it is not a doctoral degree. It's not, you don't have a residency in hospitals and that kind of thing like you guys do for naturopathic doctors. But they're incredible health professionals who really, in essence, just like naturopathic doctors, look to see where the body is weakened and bolster it up so it can heal itself. That's really what the goal is. While providing support along the way for the SOS and then helping you come up with a long-term plan. And I was blown away in this first appointment with this naturopath who thankfully I landed on the jackpot, a woman who had been a naturopath for 25 years, German, so she was very direct and really helped you change things quick, smart if they needed changing. And she asked me questions for an hour about me. And I was like, why does she want to know all this stuff? In my head, I was like, what is that even relevant for? But it kind of got me excited when 3 days later, after a couple of supplements and some revolting tasting liquid herbs, I was completely better, no strep throat. And it blew me away. I was like, what is this magic? Like, I didn't even take any medicine because I didn't get it yet, right? And so the strep throat came back, of course, because I had a chronic overgrowth that hadn't been addressed. And she had some research around a link between non-celiac gluten sensitivity and strep overgrowth, and perhaps trying to remove the gluten from my diet for a bit and see what happened. Now, that was terrifying, but what it sent me down the path of was actually looking at ultra-processed food ingredient lists for the first time in my life. I thought I was just going to be looking for gluten at which packets I couldn't eat anymore and which ones I could. But the whole exercise made me ditch the packets altogether because of all the other stuff that was in there as well, never mind the gluten. And, you know, you're a smart person. I'd been through school. I'd been through university, 17 years of education all up. And no one had ever said what you put in you and on you impacts your health. No one. And that's a real failing for me. Like, I have huge respect for teachers and schools. Like, I really do think we learn some great stuff. But there are some big holes in what we're not learning, and especially when our parents don't know either. So they're not picking up the slack at home. And so, yeah, it was like a door had opened up. Things started to add up. I started to realize, well, if I shop in the produce section with just the fruit and veggies, meat, nuts, seeds, then I don't have to look up gluten. I don't have to look at lists. That's so much easier. Everything tasted really boring, so I had to learn how to cook. And so, as you can see, things just kind of from one thing to the next. I'm catapulted into this whole new way of life. And because I figured out how to cook gluten-free and do it deliciously, I'm half French, so it's not going to be bland. And then friends were like, oh my gosh, this is gluten-free. Like, can you give me this recipe? Can you write it down somewhere so I can look it up? And the blog started, and I was having a baby soon, so I started to look at personal care. And then I was like, whoa, I thought the food ingredient lists were bad. This stuff is terrible. And then on cleaning products, they weren't even ingredient lists. You couldn't even find out what was in this stuff. So it was 16-year-old rock star me wanting to save the world and being inspired by Bob Geldof and Bono and all those guys as a teenager musician. That all just came back to my soul as a justice-driven person who wanted to change the world and who wanted to do something to make an impact. And I thought, wow, this is how I can do that. No one had any idea. And so it started about 13 years ago, and I haven't stopped since.
Something struck me, which is the word processed or processed, depending on which side of which border we're on. And that's really the critical link. And I think just intuitively looking at history and just looking at pictures of people from different decades, I think it was the early to mid 70s where there was an inflection point as far as what we were eating. Because processed food goes back almost to the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, really to about 1900. And it was a miracle because it replaced rotten food with the ability to get enough nutrition to go work in a factory. So it was really a lifesaver. But then what ends up happening is it becomes so profitable that it morphs into, well, if we can make it cheaper, faster, more addictive, et cetera, then our profit margins blow up. And, then you end up with Cheetos, which literally is like, it's like orange crack.
Yeah, I don't think that anyone ever intended on Cheetos being the evolution of what was originally like life-saving wartime snacks for soldiers and factory workers far away. So yeah, I completely agree. The thing is, if you look towards, like, especially at the end of World War II, where they had, America got this feed the world, like Americans are the greatest because you can plant these seeds and feed the world in this terrible war. And as you say, it was life-saving to millions. But the subsidies that were put in place for those farms to do that, well, no one wanted to lose those either. And so it became this really money-driven, well, what are we going to do with all this grain that we're growing all of a sudden? And then you see the cereals come in, and then you see the ultra-processed bread as opposed to the beautiful 3-day sourdoughs that our great-grandparents were making. and on we go. It was really that, like, we can't turn back from what we've set up moment in the late 40s that set us up on this course. And because there were such powerful people in this mix, from military industrial complex, from food giants that had set themselves up to help feed the world during the war, they didn't want to lose that money. So they had to figure out a new way to keep making it, unfortunately. That's what the history books show us.
Yeah, I know. I couldn't agree more. I mean, we were just in Vegas about 2 months ago, and there is literally a restaurant that just serves cereal.
Yeah.
It's called Serial Killer.
Yes,
And
for real.
It's called Serial Killer. And I'm like, yeah, you are
That's a
being killed.
non-fiction restaurant.
Yeah, and it has this wall of like 19 gazillion sugary
I
cereals.
should send you the photo.
And we did a little video there, and I'm
tomorrow.
like, cereal is nutritional pornography. Like, it has absolutely no value.
I'm going to have to Google that after we chat, because that is, and it's the glorification, right? Like the kid who wanted to collect all the different flavors of the bubble gums, you know?
Right.
I think the glorification, you want a piece of this, it's new, it's exciting. It appeals to our desire to collect and to harvest. Like, that's in our DNA, but the way we're being sort of pushed into displaying that in the modern world with ultra-processed food, it's really unhealthy. And I think part of naturally wanting to let go, instead of going down that whole willpower road and the whole, but I shouldn't, I'm trying to cut down, I'm trying to do less sugar, is to really understand what it is, where it comes from, how it's made, the ethics of the business that sell it, what the CEO is paid versus the frontline worker, and whether you think that's a fair gap, all that stuff. We have to really understand it, because then once you know, like, I never look at one of those junky things and go, I really love one of those. Like, it's because the whole thing is ugly now. It's not about willpower anymore. And I think that's such an exciting place for people to get who have tried so hard, because it's hard, right? But if you're just going on, I shouldn't have that, it's bad for me, you're not going to be successful. It's got to be a bigger learning experience than that.
So how did you overcome the willpower dilemma and get to this point?
Yeah, so really kind of what I was alluding to there, which was, okay, I really love peanut M&Ms. How am I going to give these things up? So you look at the company, and then you look at the fact that they use petroleum. Well, back then anyway, they used petroleum-based colors over natural-based colors because it was more profitable. You looked at how food scientists were measured in terms of their success and KPIs in their 6 monthly meetings on being able to shave costs and find farms where they could exploit workers for the chocolate more so that the bottom line looked better in terms of logistics and sourcing. And if you go down that road of understanding how an M&M becomes an M&M, and then how the CEO is paid ridiculous amounts of inhumane money. I call it inhumane money. It's just not necessary to pay corporate executives what we pay them. And then the frontline worker has to also do some online English teaching for Japanese students, and they also maybe have to take on a janitorial thing on the weekends just to pay their rent and feed their family. That is not a fair system. And this is really where I think we can start healing some of the political divides that have manifested in your country, in mine, many around the world. But I think America does everything bigger and better, so we see it in you guys more. I think we should actually start to think, well, this just isn't fair for anyone, regardless of who you think you're politically affiliated with. We actually need to change culture and systems, not who one votes for necessarily. There's much deeper change required here. And I think if we just start to remember what humans need and how important the truth is, like, look behind the hood at these companies and what they've done to become someone who can afford to put billboards and bus shelter ads by the millions all around the world. Like that takes a lot of money. So, very profitable. So, profit usually comes at that expense, at the expense of a lot of people down the line when it's that big and that obvious. So yeah, that's for me how I just willpower stopped being even a factor when I started understanding the ultra processed food landscape.
Interesting. So, in your book, Low Tox Life, obviously low tox diet food is, portion of it. For someone who's just starting out, what do you suggest and recommend to change up how you're eating? So, for instance, we've had so many, like I said, shows on this last year. We talked about different diets from vegetarian to carnivore to just eating healthy, balanced all around, kind of 80-20, eat healthy 80% of the time so you can mess up 20% and enjoy food. We talked, you shared about gluten-free. It's an issue for myself and our people in our family, big time, almost a similar background with overly used antibiotics and gluten sensitivity and celiac. But someone who's starting off, who's just like, well, I'm working, I'm busy, kids, it's easier to grab the little Jimmy Dean snacks and the little fruit snacks and the juice box and throw it together. What do you suggest is the few biggest changes to start making that are simple and sustainable?
So the most sustainable thing from the hydration perspective, forget the juice box, get the reusable water bottle, let the kid get their favorite, most fancy character on the front, if that's what it's going to take to get you across the line, and fill that puppy up. There's so much waste in all the BS drinks that we sell to people today, even like this whole new non-alcoholic drink sector.
Yes.
So it's like fake gin and tonic kind of in the can. They're basically just trying to protect their soda sales now that everyone's cottoning on to the fact that soda's not so great and produce different types of products instead. Water is what we need to survive, nothing else. Have your glass of wine. That's fine. Like I genuinely don't subscribe to the zero of anything. I'm European, so I'm like, well, we've got a pretty great life expectancy in my family, and red wine features at every dinner table, but it features as like a third of a glass, not as these huge servings and people getting drunk. My family doesn't get drunk. I didn't grow up with that, so that was bizarre to me, that excessive side to drinking, which we have a huge drinking culture problem here in Australia. People kind of get egged on, and if you're the guy that isn't ready to drink when it's your turn to buy the round, you get paid out for drinking too slow. And I mean, how ridiculous is all of that? It's awful. So with our kids, just teaching water from the get-go, as late as you can possibly even let them know that such a thing as soft drink and soda exists. Just keep it out of the family completely. And that starts with us, by the way. So if we've got a soda problem, diet or regular, doesn't matter. It's still all junk, and it's still all high profit crap that we're being sold that we do not need. Get used to starting to add, like, maybe do sparkling mineral water instead, and add some lemon and some fresh mint leaves and that kind of stuff. But we do not need anything other than water. And so that would really be the first place I'd start with food. And then we freak out about the daytime, obviously, a lot when kids aren't with us, or if you have to prepare a lunchbox. But I'm a big fan of just thinking of that breakfast and the dinner. Those are the things where families are usually still together, even if it's quick in the mornings. Can we do something there to clean that up? Can we move to maybe keep the toast, because that's the familiar part, but put an egg on it instead of PB&J? Like, could you do that? Fry a few eggs. It takes 3 minutes to fry eggs on high heat. Get a bigger pan if you can't fit enough for the whole family in the one because you're getting frustrated and then it's taking 10 minutes. Start thinking about efficiency to get great food on the table instead of, oh, I can't do this, it's too hard. Think instead, what do I need in my life for this to be easier?
I like your tips that you shared that I heard before about how to just transition slowly kids eating and snacks from, say, the flavored crackers.
Yeah, and then just go to plain.
Yeah.
So, and then maybe introduce a dip. So you've got a few more nutrients there. So like smash up a couple of avocados, make a beautiful guacamole, and do a plain corn chip with the guac instead of barbecue flavored chipotle spice, chips that have a whole bunch of weirdness, including code names for MSG like yeast extract and the like. And then you're eliminating a whole extra wave of potentially neuro-affecting chemicals in your food supply as well, which, we know there are a lot of kids having problems with focus, with excitatory kind of over-sensory responses to everyday regular things. And this is going to help them. It's just like literally real food calms the farm in the brain. And the more we can transition from products to produce, anything we can do to get rid of all the super fancy flavors and go to something a bit more plain and make the flavor come from a smooshed up avocado or a pureed sweet potato with some sour cream and chives, like that's delicious as a dip. There's so many things you can do, and it doesn't have to be hard. You just have to think about what excites you, because that's where you should start. A lot of people start where the fancy Instagram doctor tells them this is what you got to do, or, the wellness influencer. And so they're externalizing their health journey instead of thinking, what matters to me? What do I want to see for my kids? What do I want to see for me? What do I find exciting to change? Like start where you are motivated, not where someone's telling you to start, because there's tons we can do. We just have to do it in a more, in a way that we're listening to ourselves more, I think, because then we start to trust ourselves and feel empowered, which a lot of people feel disempowered with, never having had more information out there online. And I'm always saying, yes, listen to me, but what do you want?
I love it. And even, back to just, you're right. Get yourself real food, shop the produce and not the products, where it's the one ingredient kind of list. That's really what we've started doing. It's like, well,
yeah, I like the one ingredient called steak.
Yeah,
steak is good. I'm a big fan myself. And this is it. We have this trend towards removing steak, removing red meat, and that's really concerning when you think about the nutrients that we get from having 2 to 4 serves of steak or some sort of beef product a week. That's giving you so many B vitamins, so good for your nervous system. Teenage girls, more anxious than ever before. What are they doing? They think they have to be vegan to be cool, or to fit in, or to not get fat. There's some, no offense to any particular type of diet that anyone as an adult does to thrive and feel their best selves, or maybe to go through a cleanse patch because you need to lighten things up for your kidneys. I mean, there could be a number of reasons that you would lower your protein for a small time, but I don't see in the research that is a great idea in the long term to just start removing natural B vitamins from the diet.
no.
And I've talked to over 300 doctors on my show, and I have yet to hear, I think there was one out of 340 that was plant-based. And so completely, by the way. And so that for me kind of shows, well, I think, as you said right at the start, Tim, it's about the middle. Like there's a medium ground, and there's a reason all this whole food exists, and there's a reason the healthiest landscapes on earth have plants, animals, and some ruminants within that animal mix. There's a reason that's the healthiest type of landscape.
Well, and I think the anthropology in this is the most fascinating.
Yeah,
so if
right.
if you look at nomads, right, like so North American natives, and what did they do? They chased buffalo and they ate tons of protein and tons of fat, because they had virtually, they did have some agriculture. There was corn, there was some of these things, and then like the Inuit, the people in the north, they 50% of their calories is fat, because they eat whale blubber and all of this kind of stuff, and everyone survived. But they've also adapted over millennia to have a certain gut microbiome, to have a certain kind of diet. So you take these nomadic people that get tons of low level exercise and essentially are almost keto all the time, and you start feeding them refined carbohydrates, and they instantly get high blood pressure and become diabetics. And you're like, well, no kidding.
Yeah. Oh, and what
no
you're
kidding.
saying there is we and this is why we have to focus on our overlaps, because the commonality with most people cleaning up their diets with it, whichever way they choose, is that they're eliminating the ultra processed food.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
Number one.
Yes.
Right. It's like I'm gonna not drink Coke every day, but the only way I drink Coke is with 4 shots of whiskey. And so you get rid of the Coke, which means you get rid of the whiskey, and by magic you feel better. Well, yeah, because you got rid of 2 toxins at the same time.
Right.
Exactly.
Well, I want to get to the other, I think, important things, because we always weighing in on food things, but let's talk about the other 3 parts that you talk on low-tox living. So low-tox body, right?
Yeah.
As far as all that stuff we're putting on in to make us look youthful or feel better. Where do you start, or what are the big no-nos, or what's the most let's go through that first before I ask what you think the most important change is.
Yeah. So when we're thinking about personal care, there's really 2 groups of chemicals that emerge as concerning, and those are the ones that are potentially carcinogenic and the ones that are hormone disruptive or potentially hormone disruptive. And by hormone disruptive, for the newbies, I mean like can either block or mimic our natural hormone signaling in the body, and that's everything from thyroid to sex hormones, adrenals. Like you don't really want to make life any harder than it already is to balance our hormones by adding all this extra stuff as well. So the number one really in the hormone disruptive department, and this translates through to the home chapter in the book as well, is those synthetic fragrances. Now, synthetic fragrances, you'll notice, have become longer and longer lasting over the last few decades, to the point where you can hug someone at the gym in the morning after class and say, see you, have a great day. And then you're cooking your dinner that night and some wind blows through the kitchen window, and then you can smell your friend's perfume or deodorant still that night. Or you take some hand-me-downs from a friend who has a kid a couple of years older than you, and their laundry basket smells a certain way. You wash it, then it still smells like theirs, then it still smells like theirs. 5 washes later, you can still smell that stuff, even though you're using something completely different, hopefully non-toxic. That is the job of phthalates. So PHTHALATES. It's a sticky plasticizer compound that is in those synthetic fragrances for the main. It's kind of like about 99%. Every now and then there'll be a product that says fragrance on the label and there aren't phthalates, but most of the time still there are, unfortunately. And that fragrance being made to stick is sold to us as being successful, long lasting, 48-hour this, or, spring fresh that. And it's just all BS. I love the name of your podcast. I keep on wanting to say that. So it fits perfectly because we've been sold a lie. We don't need why is that success? And so often marketing is this. We'll create a problem you didn't know existed, and then we will sell to it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to be a little wiser on everything online, because we're being bombarded with alternative health stuff in this way as well. We have to think, okay, did I actually have a problem with my stress? Or now am I being stressed out by stress and thinking, oh gosh, yeah, I am busy with 3 kids. But like if that wasn't a negative for you and you really enjoyed the hecticness of family life and schlepping kids around and picking them up and hearing about the soccer game, so sometimes we're being made aware of things that we don't need to be made aware of to fix them so that it's productized and we buy it.
Yep.
And I think one of the number one human skills is to red flag that and just go, okay, but do I actually have a problem here? Am I actually happy to dab a little bit of essential oil every now and then when I go to dinner and just smell that delicious vanilla or vetiver or whatever it is you like to put on and just enjoy that for a few minutes? That's my getting ready kind of smell. And does it have to last 3 days? No, it doesn't.
It's like pouring gasoline on your hands. Like it just never goes away.
Awful. And yeah, it's exactly like that. And so, well, at least it smells a bit better than gasoline, but at least.
Well, I do like the smell of gasoline, though.
He's
that does remind me of the airport, and that's always a nostalgic smell for me. So I'm kind of with you on that. But what it is doing to us is stuffing around with our estrogen signaling production. This is bad for women and girls, of course, especially prepubescent, where the hormones are just starting to come online. Can be a very confusing time for the body to then be trying to navigate what it's supposed to do, given there's this these mimicking compounds in the body as well. But it's also devastating for male fertility. The research is so clear on phthalates and sperm motility, sperm quality, and sperm viability. And we know those figures are plummeting. And it used to be that fertility was largely a female concern, and now we are looking at a 50-50 situation. So our boys have got to get these awful smelling 48-hour effective sports deodorants and Lynx sprays and all those kinds of things. They have got to get out of our teenagers and young men's lives. It's easier to kind of shout at your middle-aged husband and get him to change things, but the teens and the young men who are invincible are probably the toughest category of people to change their mind on things.
It's like the biggest market. They really market it to them too.
Well,
and
they're smelly.
The girls, with all the
stores.
It's
about the girls, isn't it? And I mean, that is the number one priority. So you can kind of understand why they're so weak to those marketing messages.
But it's fascinating because there's we could get into the sociology of this, which is a complete rabbit trail. But just when you look at the physiology of sort of the demasculinization of your society, is fascinating to me because you graph testosterone levels over the last 40 years and they're plummeting. And then you wonder why you have dismotivated fat guys that can't get anything done and have no game and don't want to date and just want to sit around and watch porn all day. And you're just like, wow, this is, it's awful. We need really strong women and we need really strong men. We're different and we need to embrace those differences and celebrate it. We've been married for 31 years and and it honestly does get better every year because
you got to get rid
of it. But it gets better because you celebrate.
I'm thinking just time to get rid of your, what brand is that's in the show?
What are we getting rid of? Tell me.
Oh yeah, no, that is literally like
there's some really smelly stuff. I won't name the brand on the show, but I'm like, time to get rid of this one next.
I remember the deodorant that my husband used was the last high tox item that left our home in the fragrance department. I was like, okay, Seb, our son, and I literally cannot breathe or enter the bathroom for like a solid 15 minutes after you've used that stuff. Like, does that not tell you something? We are coughing and spluttering. Like, it is bad. And he finally let it go and he let me. And this is, okay, so for the ladies who are trying to help their men change something like this, a bit stubborn, or the teen boy, make it a gift instead of a nag. That is my number one tip when you're trying to recruit family members onto low-tox stuff, and buy 4 different types of deodorants in the low-tox space. Yes, that's going to be a little bit expensive from the outset, but what is the price of like low sperm count and poor testosterone levels? That's a much higher cost. So if you turn up and you say, oh my gosh, sweetie, or sweetheart, I was talking to a doctor. I was listening to a doctor's podcast. Like, people often need like the ABC or a doctor or like something that sounds a little bit more trustworthy, and they were stepping through the problems that men were having with their health and young boys, like not being able to get erections. Like, that's a good one to throw in there because that's terrifying for a teenage boy, the idea that might not happen for him. And one of the things contributing is the fragrances they're putting in these sprays. So I thought I'd just buy a whole bunch of stuff at Whole Foods or, whatever your local health shop is, that didn't have that ingredient in there. And I just thought, like, you tell me which one works best, which one you like the most, and then we can go with that one, right? Because, like, I don't want you having problems or not being able to have kids one day. Like, that is how serious this is.
Right.
You are not over dramatizing by having that conversation. And, a lot of people will feel confronted by that because, well, I can't talk to my child that way. But this is like, do or die. It really is. We have to change this, and getting rid of those synthetic fragrances is one of the best ways we can do that. So you start with the personal care because that's on your body. Then you look at your fabric softener. We don't even need that. So that's a saving. Then you look at the plug-in air fresheners if you're using those, or the little thing you hold under the toilet bowl. Don't need any of that either.
I hate those things.
Saving $20-$30 a month now, right? And so you actually don't need to just start buying all this extra stuff. When it comes to the fragrance, you can actually stop buying a bunch of stuff. The scented candles, there are gift shops charging like $50 for a candle. It's insane. And so we can actually stop buying a lot of that stuff. If you really want to perfume your house, I'm not a huge advocate for tons of essential oils because it takes a huge amount of plants for a teeny tiny bottle. And so that is very agriculturally intensive, but keep it special and just get, like some peppermint, some rosemary, things where there's big yield from the plants. So it's not too intensive, or some lemon. That's another great one. And just have that maybe, half an hour through your home to keep it nice and fresh and smelling yummy. Also good for focus as a side note. So that's kind of some of the strategies you can implement. If you really want some fragrance on your clothes, one of my hacks is to put a tea towel in, like just a dishcloth, in with your drying load, and to put a few drops of peppermint or eucalyptus on that, and then chuck that in, and it'll just kind of perfume the clothes really lightly. But it is kind of a re-education, kind of like ditching soda is, and you think nothing tastes like anything for a week. Like everything is bland, everything is flavorless, everything is joyless. But then if you had a sip of that soda 2 weeks after not having had any soda, you're like, whoa, that's sweet.
Right.
And it's the same with artificial fragrances. So just slowly removing them. Or you could just go cold turkey. One of my favorite experiments. You put everything in a box in the garage, fresheners, softeners, super smelly deodorants. It all goes in a box in the garage. Don't have to give it up just yet. Just do the experiment. 3 weeks, nothing like that. Just switch to a couple of natural basics. Then bring it all back in, plug it all back in, chuck the little toilet bowl thing in, use the fabric softener, see if you can breathe, because most people can't.
It's fascinating.
Realize, oh, wow. Yeah.
Since we started, we got rid of all of that stuff, and we still have a few things sort of lying around, but we walk into a home that even just with the candle, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm getting a headache now. I can't breathe. I feel I'm not even asthmatic.
It's interesting,
my throat burns.
Yeah, we're moving across the country. In the last week, we probably looked at, I don't know, like 20 houses, and you go in there, and it's like somebody punched you in the nose.
Yeah,
it's just like, wow. Like, I get it, they want to have this presentation of whatever, but when you get rid of that and then you re-experience it, it is so overwhelmingly bad. It's like when you get injured and you haven't been to the gym in 4 months, and then you go the first time, you're like,
recently I've just been there. I'm like, whoa, that's a little bit sore on the tennis court. Yeah.
It's like, I didn't realize this was this hard. Well, it's because it wasn't 4 months ago.
That's it.
Exactly. So in the home, so obviously fragrance is the biggest place to start with personal care products and home. Anything else sort of that it would be second in the home? I'm thinking, there's a lot of talk now about light or electricity, or how big of a deal is that, do you think?
Yeah, look, I mean, we have to think about stress as a soup in our life. Number one, don't stress out about stress, because that makes everything you're going to stress out about even more. So that's really, for me, I don't think we are sounding the alarm on the perceived threat of these beautiful low-tox changes we're making. Don't then start to be terrified of everything high-tox, right? That's not the best way to go about this, because then your nervous system is on board in hypervigilance. and you end up with multi-system symptoms, just stressing out about stuff. So celebrate change rather than freaking out about all the things that you can't control or something in someone else's house. Just go, well, I'm so glad we don't have this at home anymore, right? Instead of, oh my God, there's a scented candle, it's phthalates, it's trying to kill my hormones. You have to just chill, because the things you can control are generally enough to lead a healthy life. And our amazing bodies that you guys spent nearly a decade studying about before you started treating people, you will know that our detox functions are incredible. And so if they just get to do the job like part-time, they're really good at it, but they're not great full-time workers, right? And they start robbing energy from other parts of the body, and then that's when the detoxing becomes sluggish, because it literally can't keep up with the 24/7 vibe. And that's fair enough. No one can work 24/7. So I like to think about that. And so we're always just trying to take the load off. Can you turn your modem off at night at the power board before the last person who goes to bed goes to bed? It's usually going to be a teenager.
Right.
So could that happen as just a general way of reducing the amount of EMFs when the whole family goes to sleep? Because the research shows us that your HRV is higher and your heart rate lowers faster if you aren't exposed to Wi-Fi overnight. So that's a great, simple fix. And that even is very helpful in apartments. You don't have to freak out that your neighbor might have one on, because distance is everything when it comes to EMF. So just in your immediate home is a great step. Could you run some blue light blocking lights? You don't have to go the full red light district kind of vibe, but there's some beautiful amber ones now that cut blue light. And it's just such a nice vibe. In the living spaces, at your bedside table, and it helps your melatonin production stay protected, stay rising gently as the evening kicks in. Such an easy step. Can you get one of those reading lights for your teens' room when they're reading and unwinding? Can we keep technology, as in phones, out of the bed?
Yes.
Phone not in beds, right?
Right.
You can hang out texting to your friends till 10 o'clock at night, but do it at the kitchen table. Don't get into bed with your phone. That's just one simple thing we can do. And then from the mold perspective, I really do want to touch on that. Like, work on your dust. Be a dust ninja. Throw out the feather duster. And dusting is actually a little bit more technical than that. You have to wipe with a damp cloth that has a little bit, I like to put a little bit of Castile soap in it, like a Dr. Bronner's kind of soap, just a tiny drop, so it's really sticky and it takes the dust particles with it, and you keep rinsing it out, and you hot wash that, preferably with some borax, just in case there are mold particles in that dust. And don't wait with leaks. Don't see like your kitchen tap like a little bit loose or dripping back maybe, and you think, yeah, I should get onto that, but I prefer to go on holidays than fix my kitchen. No, because a $50,000 remediation and people with mold illness is way more expensive than the holiday you think you might like to take right now. Fix the leaks. Prevent water damage. And if you live somewhere humid, like your Florida, your Louisiana, kind of like the southern states, the East Coast, we're the same here, the East Coast of Australia, much more humid, way more rain. You really want to get something called a hygrometer, which is like a little digital magnetized thing you can stick on your fridge, or stick one in your bedrooms, or like maybe the shady part of the house. So for you guys, that's usually the north side of the house. There, I always have to reverse it.
Yes.
Yes, the toilets do turn the opposite direction in Australia.
So, and then just every time it's over 60% humidity, you know that you need to flick on your dehumidifiers and get it reduced, because it's that over 60% mark that mold can grow, and dust is a great food source for mold. A lot of people don't have water damage. They just have a humidity issue, and that's actually great, because that's a really easy fix with dehumidification control, because mold can be an immune dysregulator. it can be really disastrous to lots of different types of people, especially if you're quite stressed out, you're in a really busy time of your life and you're a bit weakened, or you've just come out of a virus. If there's mold in the home, that's when you're more likely to be affected. And so if you can just keep your home nice and dry, that is one of the best ways you can have a healthy home.
Well, under 60% should not be very hard. I mean, really,
Well,
in anywhere when you think of it. I mean, if I mean, most, like, because we're actually moving.
We'll wait and see what happens.
We'll
we
wait
have the
and
doors
see,
open all the time in our new home to the back deck, and it's
that's
80%
the issue.
humidity out there. What happens inside?
That's the issue, because we're actually moving to Florida in a couple months. Actually, when this airs, we'll probably already be there.
Nice.
But the that's exactly it. It's the outside. It's having the screen open. And
a lot of people think, right? Oh, I've got to have all my doors open for fresh air. Well, if you live somewhere humid, just wait till a nice hot dry day to do the air exchanging, and especially if it's raining, you want your doors closed and your dehumidifiers on.
That's a great point. It's something that we don't talk about as much in medicine or on a lot of shows I listen to. You hear all about the light, changing the light, changing the phones, the getting that out of the room, but not the mold.
But it's really interesting though, because hospitals have known, at least in a cursory manner, this. I mean, hospitals are wildly dehumidified. I used to do hospitalist work for quite a while, and I had to just, and this is when I was still wearing contacts, and I would just take them off because it was just too dry.
Yeah.
And it's because of infections. I mean, that's the thing. If you're in this high humidity world and your patients are kind of baking in this high humidity world, you have more wound infections, all of this. And you go, yeah, well, why would mold not be an issue when it transmits itself? Essentially it reproduces by shedding spores that fly everywhere.
But then emit toxins of their own, different types of bacteria, mycotoxins. So I just think developing a general awareness of how the humidity is in your home. Could you have a compact dehumidifier in the main family bathroom? And so after the showers at night, you chuck it on for a couple of hours. Just keeps the bathroom bone dry. We stop getting DMs about, how do I clean the mold out of my grout? Like, let's just not get it there in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. And then, quickly on the last sort of section on Low-Tox mind and health, what sort of your number one tip, takeaway, suggestion on reduce stress?
Don't stress out about this podcast. That's my number one suggestion. No, but I mean it, like we get excited about what you thought, ooh, I'd really like to change that. That really resonated with me. Or I have really noticed, like in winter or after the rain, I get a bit of mold on my shoes in the cupboard. Like, I'm going to focus on humidity. That really resonated. Or I'm going to focus on seeing what I can clean up easily in my kids' diets when they're at home, and I can, influence that situation and still have them like stuff. Could I cook with them more? Could we do something together? And I think the mind chapter really for me in the book is not necessarily about how you approach going low tox. It's more around, could we be more grateful and get in touch with that more often? The science is huge on gratitude and like how lovely, we do this thing called sweets and sours, my family, every dinner. And we have to share one sour because it's important to bitch about the one thing, just something crap, like let it out. Let's just get it out there. But we don't indulge in it then for 3 hours. We move on to the 3 sweets. And that's 3 things we were really grateful for in the day. And, cool things that happen, focusing on positives, because often we just focus straight on the crap and we make that huge. And then we don't spend time talking about the great things. So that is where I would like to leave our chat today, on the wonderful things that happen and really making sure that we give those more agency and space than the odd crappy thing that happens.
Perfect. I love that.
Exactly.
So Alexx, quickly before we go, tell everyone where they can find your books now and podcast and
yes.
on social, etc.
Well, it's easy because Low-Tox Life is a trademarked brand. That is, when you see those 3 words written like that, it's me. So it's the podcast is Low-Tox Life, Instagram is Low-Tox Life, Facebook is Low-Tox Life, the website is lowtoxlife.com, even the books.
Yes.
So nice and easy. Thank you so much for having me, guys.
Thank you for being here. It was great. There's so much more in her books and on her podcast, which I love. So everybody check it out. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Now, a final word from our sponsor. At Pearson Ravitz, they understand that life can change in an instant. It's hard to imagine that a sudden illness, injury, or catastrophic event could put you and your family in a devastating financial situation. Physician-founded and physician-focused, Pearson Ravitz builds human connections before they create quotes. Visit www.pearsonravitz.com today and embark on a journey of safeguarding your future.
It's no secret that medicine is a bit, uptight. That's why Tim and I created BS Free MD, to mix things up a little and have fun in the process. Besides, we are having these exact same discussions all the time, so we thought we might as well invite everyone to the party. If you really like us, you can get plenty more and maybe see one of Tim's cool tattoos on our Instagram or Facebook pages at BS Free MD. See you next time.
While we try to keep BS Free MD as raw and real as possible, we can't be held responsible for any medical decisions or discussions had as a result of what you've heard on the show. We know, bummer. But the truth is, we really do care about your questions. So feel free to reach out to us by email at doc@bsfreemd.com.